Hello, my name is Hilary Lanham. I'm Head of Productivity Services at Lloyds Banking Group. And this is Tom Kelk, Senior Product Owner for Productivity Intelligence. Lloyds Banking Group is the UK's largest bank with over 30 million customers, which is about half of the UK population. We have $1.23 trillion of total assets, which is about a third of the UK GDP. And we are the UK government's sole banking partner. And yet, despite all this, most of you here have never heard of us. So please let me give you a short history lesson. Lloyds Bank started life as Taylor and Lloyds in Birmingham in 1765. It was founded by Samson Lloyd and John Taylor and their two sons. However, Lloyds Banking Group today is made up of multiple financial organisations, and the oldest of which is the Bank of Scotland, which was founded in 1695, a mere 330 years ago. This bank has supported the UK through French revolutions, industrial revolutions, world wars, and into the digital age. And whilst Lloyds is still seen as a very old and established British institution, we've only been able to survive by being on the cutting edge of modern innovation. We have been pioneers with many firsts credited to the group. We issued the first paper money in 1696. We granted the first ever mortgage in 1775, just before a small event called the US Declaration of Independence. And finally, we are the first bank to have, UK bank, to install a computer in 1959. So since 1970, in the digital age, we have acquired all of these companies. And they brought with them their own systems, data, ways of working, and let's be honest, their tech debt. And historically, we've been less inclined to remove our legacy systems. After all, they were built to last and extortionate to replace, leading the organisation of today to have a resemblance to the City of London, where we have our head office. So just as St. Paul's Cathedral stands shoulder to shoulder with the Shard, so too does our mainframes, batches, and C++ code bases reside alongside our AI, ML, and serverless architecture. So today, Lloyds holds the ambition of becoming the UK's biggest FinTech because it realises that to survive, we need to keep relevant, we need to evolve, and we need to be agile to maintain our market advantage.
Now, if you were going to design a FinTech from scratch, it would look something a bit like this. Structured, modern, scalable. However, as Hill's outlined, life isn't quite so straightforward in LBG. We're a little bit more like this. For those that don't know, this is an actual place in the UK called Spaghetti Junction. And we felt it gives a fair indication of the various technical challenges we have at LBG. So to bring this to life and bring that complexity a bit more through, at the start of 2025, we had 16,000 engineers across 45 business areas, hundreds and hundreds upon teams led by skilled and very opinionated engineering leads. 80,000 GitHub repos across 1,000 GitHub organizations in 3 completely separate GitHub instances. Not to mention, we also had Endeavour, Bitbucket, amongst others. We had over 80 federated and isolated artifact repositories with very little observability to indicate who was using them and why they were using them. 8 pipeline technologies: Jenkins, Spinnaker, Azure DevOps, GitHub Actions, TFS, and thousands upon thousands of hand-built pipelines on top of this. 7 cloud hosting environments. Nearly every single application in the organization was a monolith, sometimes mega monolith. So, of course, the aspiration is to move towards microservice architecture, but change is not always that easy. So as a way, with companies like ours, we embarked on a transformation journey. Originating in 2021, the bank started a series of enterprise-wide shifts. The catalyst came from the top. In came a new breed of technical exec that placed emphasis on what it takes to turn what we describe as an oil tanker of an organization around. The first of these shifts mirrored this emphasis, bringing together business and tech in terms of leadership and priorities. Previously, the business called the shots, with tech left to run on a shoestring, make do, patch up, rather than invest and improve, leading to tech debt and creaking architecture.
So it was at this time that I was leading a small engineering transformation team whose role it was to parachute into teams and advise them on what they needed to do to become more productive. So, think automation, lean processes and such. Success at this stage equated to cost saving. Who could we get rid of? And engineering experience and cost avoidance was just not considered. And ironically, it was way back in this time that we gave our first punt at trying to measure engineering. So as well as managing this small team, I was also given a budget of about $12.7 million for people to come and pitch their transformation ideas for me, and I would invest in them, a Shark's Tank, if you will. So one of the ideas that was pitched was a dashboard that they called Speedy, and it would record real-time engineering metrics. Now, unfortunately, this proof of concept did not take off, partly because of the complex technological landscape that Tom outlined, but also the organization just wasn't ready for this level of data.
The second of these shifts saw a move from project to product. Teams encouraged to invest, not necessarily financially, but in the sustainable growth of their products, focus being on customer, resilience, service, and long-term vision. And whilst this was true for our financial products, the same principle was applied to internal enabling teams too. Teams that enabled others to meet our customer needs were also treated as customers by central teams. We needed to listen to their feedback and evolve our internal strategic products to meet their needs.
And so the engineering transformation team evolved into a larger engineering experience team. Our customers, the LBG engineers, were reporting systemic issues and negative engineering experience. And so now, instead of parachuting into teams to help them, we were looking across systemic issues and common friction themes around things like devices and accesses. We totally believed at this stage that happy engineers made productive engineers. And this time, the bank actually bought into this. And we were no longer beholden to return on investment. As long as the engineers were being unblocked and were given positive verbatim feedback, that seemed to be enough. And yet for us and our team, we knew we were never going to be able to evidence the benefits that we were bringing without having the measurement of productivity.
So now we come to the latest shift, entitled Engineering Excellence. The main focus areas were simplification, standardization, modernization. And the main ambition was to move to a single, centrally maintained internal development pipeline, IDP. This would remove the need to maintain the thousands of bespoke and unreliable pipelines and allow the engineers to focus their efforts on delivering more features for customers. Simplification of the estate would also make the task of adopting product and customer mentality actually possible. Centralized pipelines have been attempted before, but this was alongside the other shifts combined with a clear top-down directive that meant that this time it would be the one that worked.
And so my team evolved again. From engineering experience to engineering productivity services, and we sit as part of a wider engineering platform. Today, my team stands at 50 permanent employees and 18 partners. Now, the engineering platform's remit is to create a single pipeline that will make engineering better, but we seem to have no data to be able to evidence whether this will or not. So as a result of standardizing the engineering architecture and approach, for the first time, we were going to be able to implement a scaled, enterprise-wide productivity measurement that senior leaders were actually asking for. So today, my team has 4 towers, the first of which is productivity tooling. So this is not the same as engineering tooling per se. That's looked after in the wider engineering team. But these are tools around things like workflow and strategic planning. We look after engineering journeys, specifically across the hiring, onboarding, mover and leaver journeys, as well as supporting and unblocking our existing engineers. We have an information and collaboration arm. So over the past year, we've taken 70 disparate engineering information sources and collated those into an engineering hub, making it easier to find reliable and trusted information that's easily accessible. And finally, we have our productivity intelligence tower, led by Tom, that brings together qualitative and quantitative data for which we can ask hypotheses of and get insights from.
And to be honest, the start of my team was pretty bumpy. We didn't lack data in quantity, but we lacked it in quality, and indeed the access and the skills to extract it. So it wasn't really ideal. Tooling ownership was spread far and wide, and in some cases non-existent. Teams were not ready for data requests and couldn't provide it in a consumable way. The other challenge was the inevitable politics. We own that data. Why do you want that data? So whilst we waded through the people and the process, that quantitative side of things, we started with the qualitative.
We identified that our mortgages team was about to issue its own survey to its engineers to really get a grip of what their experience was. And so we partnered with them, not only to get them a feedback mechanism that worked, but also make sure it was scalable for the group. And we got that survey using examples, things like DX and NSAT, and we took all the learnings that we took from last year's summit. So we called our feedback mechanism the engineer to emphasize that we are here to listen to our engineers. Please do not steal the name because it's the thing we're most proud of. The engineer includes scale-based questions such as, how easy is it to do your work? Do you feel equipped with the right accesses? And they are gathered on a Likert scale. We also ask our engineers on agree-disagree statements, such as our code release process is simple and safe and painless, or our bug resolution process is flawless. Finally, the survey also gives the opportunity to give good written feedback, such questions like, have you got an improvement suggestions, or what is slowing you down? And honestly, it's these questions that give us the most colour and help add real clear context to some of the scores that we're getting.
And the mortgages team that Hills outlined just there, they were our partners on this, and they prided themselves on their own pipeline. They called it the golden standard for the organisation. However, the feedback through the engineer was very different. Predominantly in three areas. There were frustrations with pipeline speed. There was poor pipeline and environment stability and insufficient documentation. That feedback was news to the DevOps team who built that pipeline, and then they went through the verbatim responses and followed up with the teams to understand the problems in more detail, leading them to three areas that they improved. In response, they created four work items to improve that experience and team productivity. They created mini builds, which reduced testing down to minutes. They removed features in the pipeline that weren't being used. They refined the code, which saved 2 minutes off most builds, and they upgraded the pipeline with more build agents, resources, and an improved chipset. At around 200 engineers in that one mortgages team, these changes had a pretty significant impact. So thanks to the qualitative feedback through the engineer, the teams now have a better tooling fit for their needs, and this continuous feedback loop has been established and is now being utilized to drive optimization and improvements going forward. And this was exactly the sort of example we could use internally to justify the value. In May, we had further enhanced the engineer to offer an enterprise-wide survey. One pivotal decision was in how we distributed it. We needed engineering leaders who wanted data on their teams instead of forced upon them. Leaders we could rely upon to listen to that feedback and action change. So to enable this, we treated engineering leaders as our recipients, selling the vision to them directly. The obvious disadvantage of this approach was a bit of a slow uptake. It was going to be steadier, given our reliance upon those time-poor leaders. And this was something Olga spoke about earlier, how team leads are seen as the perfect catalysts for that change, yet they felt burdened by that role. So to reduce that burden and standardize the outreach a little, we developed an app. that we could enable a one-click distribution to those teams. This made it easy for the leads to get the information out, it increased the usage, and also gave us valuable metadata on who was interested in using our product and who was actually using it. So on average, the survey takes 7.5 minutes. We've seen a broad representation from across our teams. 1,200 responses so far, with 100% of our CIOs represented. We see a really high quality of response within that too. So while the quantity has been encouraging, the quality is more important. 2,000 verbatim responses, but 90% of the responses we've received include something meaningful in that verbatim feedback.
However, we knew that qualitative was never going to be enough on its own. So in parallel to the work we were doing on the engineer, we were researching frameworks, quantitative data sources, and identifying our key metrics. Experience told us, number one, don't think you're special. Lloyds has a habit of thinking that everything it has to have is bespoke because we're so different and complex. But we knew that when it came to a framework, we wanted to follow industry standards and adopt something that had been tried and tested. Number two, don't jump to the answer. So many times we are sold tools that have the promise of giving us the answer before we're really sure what question it is we want to ask. So whilst the off-the-shelf product may well be where we end up, at least we're going to know what it is we want to ask it before we assess the silver bullet of how. And then finally, think Brian. We were lucky enough to spend some time with the wonderful Brian from Microsoft, and a piece of advice he gave us really stuck with us. And that was, think hypothesis first. Don't just go grabbing all the data your bank has. Really think about what you want to ask the data and gather the data accordingly. And that question that you ask that data has to be actionable. Otherwise, why ask it? So ultimately, we chose the SPACE framework. It fit our experience background. It included the qualitative element that we valued so highly. And it also allowed for DORA, which was familiar within the group already. But crucially, it meant we could sell this to our exco. This wasn't just our idea. It came with the kudos of being industry recognized and adopted by the tech giants. And ultimately, this gave it immediate credibility.
One of the first quantitative measures we went after was time to first commit, or zero to hero, as it became internally known, hypothesizing we'd see times under 5 days. And we love this metric for a couple of reasons. Firstly, it's so simple. It's really impactful in storytelling and really easy to drive change. And secondly, as Hills outlined earlier, we have a team within our tower that is sole focus, or one of its sole focuses, is improving that onboarding journey. So they could take the data we had, they could help validate it with us, but then drive action off the back of it. The process, though, as has been true for other metrics we've been building, far from simple. Commit data exists in 5 different code repositories, including the aforementioned 3 GitHub separate instances. One of these instances is strategic, yet hadn't been launched, so we had no data. One held the bulk of commit data, yet we couldn't extract it. And the final one was fated, but crucially gave us access, manual at first, for extracts to analyze. GitHub.com, our largest repository, has finally become available a mere 15 months after starting our conversations. So commit data was tricky, but at least the start date would be easily gathered from Workday, right? No. Start date exists in 5 different data sources and is manually inputted by hiring managers, who are asked, amongst other things, to input an original hire date, a hire date, and an actual hire date. That human error risk meant a baseline was difficult for us to nail down without speaking directly to colleagues. We found numerous engineers committing 300 days before they'd even joined the organization, only to later discover that these colleagues had already been contractors in the organization and had converted to perms. But there was no field in Workday to capture this. So we finally had a commit date, a hire date, alongside data from ServiceNow. And we could identify when colleagues did their first commit, as well as when they were technically able to do their first commit. So looking back, I think we underestimated this data extract complexity and were quite naive. We expected to get data and analyze it. However, without engineering and analytical capabilities within the team and access to appropriate data sources, that was impossible.
So as a product-first organization, we realized that to release the value of this data, we needed to identify our customers, understand their needs, and make the data consumable on a self-serve basis. And the reason that we love coming to this conference is it's so validating when you hear experts such as Nicole and Abby talk about the metrics being treated as products. It makes us realize that, we're doing something right, because that's exactly what we tried to do. So our first customer group that we focused on were the engineer leads. We made it easy for them to digest the engineer information through creating an engineer dashboard. So now, as an engineering leader, I can select my team at whatever level, and I can also look at the data comprehensively, or I can choose a specific period of time to view it. I can see the data across these 5 key areas: enjoyment, ease of access, time for learning, new feature tech deck balance, and also how easy it is to do the work. I am able to see the score based on the time period that I've chosen, but crucially, I'm also able to see that score as a trend over time. And why that matters is if as an engineering lead, I've made a change, I want to know whether that change has landed and whether I'm seeing the positive impact of the change I've made. Each of these have a deep dive option, which allows me to view that data at different levels. So maybe as job family or at feature team level, but I will never be able to see the feedback given at individual level. So by clicking on the heat map, I'm able to view my team's data and compare it to the group average. This isn't a good or bad thing, and there is no repercussions for deviation, but it does give me context, and it allows me to see where I've got outliers and what might need my attention. I'm also able to select the free text questions, and I am able to see everything my team have said. We have a word cloud to help identify, but ultimately, this allows me to hear from every single one of my team, not just the ones that shout the loudest. And it really gives me a clear view of what they need from me as a leader, but also from the wider engineering ecosystem.
The other way we supported our engineering leads was bringing this qualitative data together with some of the quantitative data I outlined earlier to derive a greater level of insight, validate the additional hypotheses, and inform strategic decision-making. Once again, our approach here was customer-led. Our customers were the ones who were going to affect change, so we needed to know what they wanted to better understand. We created a working group with passionate engineering leads who created our backlog and helped prioritize our roadmap. The group also helped us guide us on how they wanted to consume data and how we could make it actionable for them. Here are some examples of ways that's happening. Strategic tooling adoption. We mentioned this earlier, the adoption, the building and adoption of IDP. Our hypothesis was that our teams with higher adoption of strategic tooling will see higher scores on our engineering excellence like-art statements. Utilizing the volume of deployments by team and matching with qualitative scores across our engineering excellence statements, we could evidence a stark uplift in perception across the board. The team with higher strategic production employments outperformed the legacy average on every single engineering-focused metric, some in the region of 20%. These findings have allowed our leaders to better drive prioritization and give extra validity to the organization on strategic direction. And back to the point that Nicole was talking about earlier, these are conversations we can have with our executives, right? This is the stuff that gets them interested in what we're talking about. Second one, PR cycle time. Now, true to our self-deprecating British nature, we hypothesized that PR cycle time was lagging behind our competitors, and quite frankly, you guys. However, what we found actually countered that theory. Cycle time per 1,000 PRs was comfortably within good benchmarks. This also allowed us to identify those not moving so quick, some over 5 days, and deep dive into seasonal changes, tech stacks, team compositions, and ways of working to highlight opportunities to their leaders. This also exposed a lack of standardized branching strategies across the organization, which has opened a healthy debate on that approach. Happy engineers make productive engineers. Hilary outlined this earlier, one of our passion projects. But we actually needed to see if the years of championing engineering experience was actually supported in the data that we gathered. Sure enough, 3 variables, ease, enjoyment, and productivity, were positively correlated with each other. As the ease of doing work increased, enjoyment tended to increase. And ease and enjoyment together, as they both increased, so did perceived productivity. Finally, we could begin to quantify value in improving experience, again, helping prioritization for our leaders and our internal conversations. And finally, AI utilization. Naturally, the first thing we've been asked about, and we're really early on this journey, which is why the talks at the summit so far have been really valuable. So we hypothesized that AI usage would increase that perceived productivity and also ease of work. And this played through. 70% reported using AI daily or a few times a week. This is above the DX benchmarks, the research that Brian's done, and around about the same mark as the research Brian's done. And we found that frequent AI users were 7% more likely to feel highly productive. Interestingly, we also found that employees using AI daily or a few times a week were significantly more likely to rate their enjoyment at work as 8 out of 10 or higher. Similarly with many others, we're now actually trying to figure out whether the perceived plays through to actual. But you've definitely heard enough about that over the course of the conference.
So the next customer group that we were providing for were our enabling product owners. So these are product owners that manage our internal engineering tools and products within the group that serve our 16,000 strong engineering community and as such impact their productivity. So now, as an enabling services product owner, I now have a dashboard where I can see data taken from our enterprise version of Stack Overflow. And I can see what job families are interested in my product on Stack, where they are within the bank, what groups of areas are using it. And I can also see the names of those who are interacting with the questions, either asking or answering the questions. And as a product owner, that helps me identify my champions, my areas that are less interested in my product. I might need to do a bit more sales there. Where people are using it, where can I go and find those success stories? I can see how we are catering for our customers. So I can see how long it takes us to respond to a question on Stack Overflow. I can see what questions are being asked pertinent to my product. And I can see what searches using my product name are bringing back. And why is this important? Well, it helps me identify, have I missed something with my learning? Can I crowdsource ideas for improvements? What more do I need to do to cater for my customers? And then finally, they can also see all of that rich engineer verbatim feedback in writing that pertains to my product. So I'm able to use the search terms, multiple search terms. I'm allowed to understand where they're saying we've got blockers, where they've got suggestions. I can see the word cloud. And it just really gives me a great insight as to what all of the engineering community are saying about my product. So it's so important, we believe, that we surface this customer feedback in an easy to consume way so that the product owners make the changes based on the breadth and not depth. It's also about taking the same exceptional standard of care that we have for our external customers and applying that to our internal technical audience.
So the final customer, the engineer themselves, they benefit, of course, from all of this work. So not only do their voices get heard through the engineer, but actually they can now see their feedback being actioned, which builds trust in the engineer and allowing the feedback loop to stay active. However, we've gone one step further. Now, as an engineer who has contributed a submission, from Q4, I'll get bespoke updates on the actions that I've raised directly related to my feedback, instead of generic leadership updates with promises of improvements that do not impact me. I'll be able to drill down into both product level and team level backlog items based on the feedback I've given and view these in roadmaps, allowing me to manage expectations on when a change will come and understand the rationale of why not, or how I can contribute to the solution if I wish. Now, as an engineer who's contributed to the backlog, this work will allow us to continue this feedback loop going and make sure over the next few quarters we see more and more submissions.
So what's next? Well, clearly we've got a long way to go to fit what we've talked about into the material of Lloyds Banking Group. This that we've shown you so far really has been a journey over the last 12 months. And there's no doubt that it's going to take time to penetrate through the organization. We want to mature our offerings. We want to offer more quantitative and qualitative data from additional sources to strengthen our ability to answer the hypotheses posed by our engineering leads. We obviously want to understand the impact of AI on the productivity of the bank. And we want to embed the product insights into the routine of every product owner in the bank so that they truly are catering to their customers. We're also looking at how we collect that qualitative data. At the moment, as Tom outlines, the engineering leads seek that feedback from their teams, but we're wondering whether making it more event-driven and triggered might cater for more feedback to be given in a real-time basis. And we won't be reliant on the engineering leads anymore. Finally, we are looking to personalize. We would like to personalize the experience for all of our customers. And for our engineering leads, this might look like being able to pose their hypotheses directly to our data source with AI. Or for our engineers, it might mean that they only are asked to ever give feedback on something that really resonates with them in their team and in their role.
But stretching the vision a bit further on into the future, we want to become more proactive with the data that we have. This will evolve from being reactive to predictive, utilizing AI to improve both the engagement with our products, but also the speed and personalization of the insight given. Ultimately, we want to be able to suggest improvements before they're identified as issues and remove the friction points for engineering leaders by being more deeply embedded in enabling the changes suggested by our data.
And so, to summarize, the journey that we've shared with you today worked for us. But we know more than most that one size does not fit all. Like I said earlier, we came to the conference last year and we were totally inspired. We were validated that we were definitely going in the right direction. But honestly, we were baffled. How are we going to follow the likes of Google and Meta? And how were we going to do that in our complex organization? So the real game changers for us when it came to productivity measurement were senior buy-in. I mean, as I detailed, I'd spent years pushing for engineering experience and understanding the value of productivity measurement, but really, it was only once our senior managers got interested did it really get traction and move forward. Research the industry and honestly, shamelessly copy them. We didn't bother wasting time reinventing the wheel. If these, productivity gods were telling us it was the right thing to do, we'd be fools not to do it. We involved our customers to help us shape our products. So instead of believing that we were delivering what they needed, they were in it with us and they were telling us directly. And again, on that same note, we made it easy for the customers to use our products. We literally took our horse to water and then helped it to drink rather than just assuming it would. And then finally, doing the qualitative first, I think, was a really good move for us because it really helped get that data in quickly, helped us tell stories and make changes almost immediately whilst we figured out the complexity of the quantitative feedback.
So we're not here to claim the title of industry leaders in productivity measurement. As Hill said, we joined the DPE Summit last year, and we were, frankly, in awe of most people in this room. And we'll leave again equally inspired. However, hopefully we shared a bit of insight about how to be creative in a quite restrictive environment, how to be relentlessly customer and product focused, and how that's raised the bar for engineering experience in LBG. Thank you so much for your time today. We'd love to answer any softball questions you want to throw at us and discuss anything that we've shared.